Hello everybody, today we're taking a look at the Hobbymate 145mm frame kit. So the wheelbase is 145mm. Across the front and the back from side to side is about 90mm. The arms are hair over 4mm thick. Top plate is 1.5mm. Bottom plates are also 1.5mm. Camera mounting plate is also 1.5mm. The distance between the plates, the front mounting plates, is about 19mm. That'll fit a Runcam Swift style camera. The distance from the top plate to the bottom plate is 30mm. These are 3mm bolts for mounting. You'll notice here that the machining on the arms is very nice. It's beveled. It's not sharp at all. Let me get a close look at that. The spacing is for a full-size flight controller, so it's 30.5mm from center to center for the mounting plates for the flight controllers, and if you're going to use a 4-in-1 ESC like I'm going to. So, I mean, this frame is solid. You can see here they've actually got individual arms that bolt through here. So let's see what this weighs. Okay, it rise at 44 grams. Also, the motor spacing, the bolt pattern spacing is 12mm. So that means that it'll fit either 1300 series or 1400 series motors. Also, put this over in inches. Also, the spacing between about the center of the motor shaft and the arms is over 1.5 inches. So that means that this will support up to 3-inch props. So as part of this build, I'm going to be using these Hobbymate 1306 3100 kV motors. They've got, put that back over in millimeters. They've got 5mm output shaft, handle up to 4S. They weigh 12 grams. Also be trying out this Hobbymate all-in-one flight controller. So this has an F3 processor and a 40-channel FPV transmitter built in. So it's got LED readout here. Tells you which band and channel you're on. It's got the little button over here to switch your bands and channels. It has selectable output between 0. You can actually turn it off, the FPV transmitter, between 0, 25 milliwatts, 200 milliwatts, and 500 milliwatts. It has a Betaflight OSD chip, omnibus firmware, a 5-volt 3-amp BEC. It has support for both buzzers and LED strips. It has a real boot button. It comes with this pigtail for connecting up to your antenna, and it is an SMA connector. And all of this weighs rounding up to 16 grams. Also be using this Hobbymate 4-in-1 20-amp ESC. So each channel is rated at 20 amps. It has a max peak capability of 25 amps for 10 seconds. It's compatible up to D-Shot 600, so it's compatible with all the multi-shot protocols, and then the digital protocols up to D-Shot 600. And it also has a 5-volt 1.5 amp BEC on this also. And it weighs about 12 grams. Here's my antenna, again SMA, cloverleaf. I've got also for the receiver, I'll be using one of these little Hobbymate S-Bus and PPM FR Sky receivers. This weighs less than a gram. And for the camera, I'll be using Runcam Swift 2, which fits perfectly in the 19 millimeters. So let's go ahead and build this. Okay, I'm all done with the build. I think it turned out great. So if you want to see the full build video, I'll have it later in the video along with the setup in Betaflight and BL Heli Suite. But you know, using one of these 4-in-1 ESCs and one of these all-in-one flight controllers, you know, made it extra clean. This is the cleanest build I've ever had. So I've got the receiver mounted up in here on top. You can get to the bind button easily. It just plugs in the side here of the flight control. The same thing for the camera, plugs in the front. Remember, this has got the Betaflight OSD, so we'll have all that showing on the screen. Got the 4-in-1 ESC plugged in the flight controller. Again, that's up front. You might be able to see it down in there, but that's plugged in right up front. And I did run that one power wire to the back on the positive battery lead. But all in all, it turned out really nice. So we'll get some props on this and we'll take it down to the field. Okay, here we are at the local park for the Maiden. I've got a 4S 450 milliamp hour 75C battery, and let's figure out a way to get to stand up right here and arm it. Okay, just running in stability mode right now. Let's switch over to a little bit of breeze. It's acro. Let's try a little punch out test. Alright, here we go. Alright, that's pretty good. No complaints there. Do that again. Yeah. No problem. All right. Seems good. Do a little more punch out test and we'll feel the motors. Back down. Motors are cool. It's about 60 degrees out today, so I wasn't pushing it too hard. So let's do a little FPV. So I just got back from the Maiden, and I wanted to point out some of the main qualities of this frame. First of all, it is very stiff. These 4mm thick arms are extremely strong. Second, it can hold full-size boards. These boards are 36mm by 36mm and on hole spacings of 30.5mm. So it's nice that it can hold that. Leaves a lot of options on what you can use. And probably lastly, that it's sized to hold these 19mm micro cameras. These cameras, everybody's using these now. They're available in CCDs. There's not a lot of reason to use the bigger cameras anymore. So with that, let's go over to the computer and I'll show you how I set it up in Betaflight and BL Heli Suite. Before we do that, let's check the weight. With these components, it weighs about 153 grams, which is extremely light. And with the 4S450, we're at about 209. So extremely light build. So now let's go over to the computer.
So here we are in Betaflight. I've got my flight controller hooked up to the USB port. I'll be showing you the configuration for the Hobbymate all-in-one F3 board that has the built-in VTX, but really most flight controllers are configured the same way. So if you haven't already, install the drivers for Betaflight and your board. Betaflight has them here on the welcome page, links to them. So once you get that done, you'll see a COM port being listed up here for which port your flight controller is connected to your computer. You hit connect. You know it's good. If it goes onto this screen, you can wiggle your quadcopter. You see it moving on the screen. So the very first thing I like to do when I first set up a board is go to the CLI and get the stock settings. Get a backup of the stock settings. So if you type dump into the command line at the bottom, you can right click and copy all of this and paste this into Notepad and save it on your computer as the stock setup as a backup. So if you mess something up, you can always come back and go back in here and paste this all back in. It's just one big paste. If I did it right here, I just right click what I just copied and paste that all back in. It's all here. If I scroll up at the bottom here, you can see it's all there. I'm not going to go ahead and save that, but you would have to hit save when you get done with that, and it would apply all those settings. So I'm going to go back over here and go back to setup. Once you get out of the CLI, it'll reboot, and then you hit connect again, and then we'll go through the various tabs. So on the first tab, really the only thing on here is, well, you can back up it here via Betaflight as well, but you can calibrate the accelerometer. I don't need to do that right now. So move on to ports. I have my receiver hooked up to UART3. It's a serial receiver. It's S-Bus. And so that's hooked up on this board on UART3. Moving on to configuration, I have the Hobbymate 4-in-1 ESC board. It's compatible up to D-Shot 600, so I have that selected. I have motor stop selected. I like to have that. I don't like to spin motors when armed. I'll take care of that through air mode. And I also liked to disarm the motors independent of throttle value when I disarm it. So I have that checked. Other than that, this board does feature an OSD, so that's checked. Since the OSD has VBAP monitoring, this is really optional because they'll be seeing that on the OSD. When you get done with any changes here, you would hit save and reboot. Oh, first of all, I should note that this is where you change the receiver. You know, as I mentioned, I have a S-Bus receiver, which is very common now, and this is what most people will use. And so I have that selected, and then what type of S-Bus. I have a FR Sky S-Bus. If you had Spectrum, you would select either one of these. So you have the standard options. So if you change anything, you hit save and reboot. Moving on to failsafe, these are defaults. It's set up to drop after a short period of time with no signal. That's the way I like to have them set up. On to PID tuning. I have not changed this. These are stock settings. This is what I flew on in the Maiden video. They fly pretty good. I still need to do some tuning probably on this. I'll be doing that here in the near term. On the receiver, you have to have a battery plugged in and your transmitter turned on. pretty much the things to do here is the first thing you'll do is checking, make sure that all your channels are coming through. When you move like your ailerons or your roll stick, you want to make sure that it's moving the correct direction and in the right ones mapped to it here. If it's not moving the correct direction, you need to reverse that on your radio. If it's not moving, let's say if I move the aileron and the elevator bar here was moving, you would need to switch those two here on the channel map. I've never had to switch rudder. I've only ended up having to switch the first three here. You just need to reorder these and hit save each time so that you get them mapped correctly. The other thing you want to do here is to change your servo throw so that you get it all the way from approximately 1,000 up to about 2,000, and you want them centered. You can change your sub trim in your radio to change it so that you have approximately 1,500 as centered. So I got all that set up. You can also see here that we got the aux channels on my radio. So there's aux 1. I'll use that uh, to arm the quad. Aux 2 here, 3-position switch for flight mode, and aux 3 here, which I'm not using, but you could use that for beeper or something. So I've made 8 changes, hit save. So on the modes, I have, like I mentioned a second ago, I have the aux 1 hooked up to my arm, so you can see when I flip that, it does arm the quad. Um, then my aux 2 here is set up for my flight modes. In one position, it's angle, flip it to a middle position. It is now horizon. You flip it to the last position. It was really acro mode, and I'm also activating air mode, which essentially spins the props independent of throttle position, or really at near zero throttle position. So it's very handy for acrobatics. So um, that's pretty much it. If you ended up having a beeper, you could add an additional channel here that would maybe be like my aux 3 or something like that, but you could add that if you wanted to. I don't have a beeper set up on this one yet. So that's essentially it as far as the setup. Now what we need to do is make sure, once we have all that set up, we make sure that our motors are turning the correct direction. So what you want to do here is not have props on. And then what we're going to do is make sure that all our motors are spinning in the correct direction. And because we're using a 4-in-1 ESC on this build, make sure that the right motors, when I turn on motor 1 here, make sure that actually motor 1 on the quadcopter is actually spinning. And it's likely not, because we know that this is where we're going to have to do some remapping. So props are off. So let's go ahead and switch this little box here. All right, so let's go over here and we'll spin up motor number 1. All right, so in Betaflight motor number 1, actually on my quadcopter, motor number 4 is spinning. So I'm gonna have to remap these. So I'll go ahead and write that down. So in Betaflight 1 is equaling on the quad 4. So now I'll spin number 2. Okay, 2 is correct. I'll spin number 3. Okay, in Betaflight, motor number 3 is actually spinning motor number 1, and spin the last one here. And so motor number 4 is actually spinning motor number 3 on the quad. So I got all those written down, and so I'll show you how to remap those. And as far as direction goes, uh, number 2, 3, and 4 all need to be reversed. We'll do that in BL Heli Suite. But let's take care of the motor mapping first. Go ahead and flip this back off here, and we'll go over to CLI. All right, so what we need to do here is type resource here in the bottom. So this is how the motors are presently mapped. Motor number 1 is mapped to B08, 2 is mapped to B09, 3 is mapped to A03, and 4 is mapped to A02. So we're going to need to reorder these based on what we wrote down. We don't have to mess with number 2, it was fine, but we're just going to have to assign the numbers, the right mapping for each motor based on what we just saw. So what I usually do is I'll go ahead and copy this, and I'll paste this into a notepad. And then within notepad, I'll kind of write down what I need to change, and then I'll make up the new motor mapping in notepad. So I've already done that. So this is the original right here. This is matches what we have right here on the screen. We see that one's B08, down through here, we see they're all the same. So this is the original. So then I write down what we just saw. So we saw that number 1 in Betaflight was number 4 on the quad, 2 was 2, 3 in Betaflight was 1 on the quad, and 4 in Betaflight was 3 on the quad. So we'll need to reorder this so that um, it works out properly. So we're going to for number four, we are going to we're going to copy in this position right here, whatever was for number 1. So 4 used to be A02, but we saw here that 4 needs to be assigned to what is in 1. So we'll grab what's 1 up here and we'll copy in the 4 position. And we'll do that for 1, 3, and 4 here. So I've already done that. So once you get done with the reordering, all you have to do is copy this and bring it back into Betaflight, into the CLI, paste it down here. It's all there. If you scroll up here on the right, you can see all of them here. And then you hit enter and it remaps it. And we'll confirm that it did it by hitting resource again. Got to spell it right. And we'll go back and compare what we have new here to what we had inside Notepad. So now we see it took. So we see number 1 is A03, 2 is B09, 3 is A02, and 4 is B08. So that's all right, but it's not going to do any good at all unless we hit type save down here at the bottom. And now it's saved. So now we can connect again. Go to CLI, just confirm one more time, type resource, and confirm that everything's saved. It did. Motor 1's A03, B09, A02, B08. So, yep, that all matches. So we're good. So now we can go back to the Motors tab, connect again, back to the Motors tab. Still no props. We can spin the motors and make sure they're spinning in the right position. There we go. 1 is in the correct position, 2 is in the correct position, 3 is in the correct position, and 4 is in the correct position. But we still got to reverse them. So I still need to reverse 2, 3, and 4 because they're not spinning in the correct direction. So we're done here in Betaflight. So now we can disconnect out of here and we can go over to BL Heli Suite. So now here in BL Heli Suite, very similar connecting, just like Betaflight. You would hit read setup here, and you can see here, so we got to change 2, the direction, motor 2, 3, and 4, and then we hit write setup. We can hit read again to make sure that it took, and it did. So that's it. So now we can go back over to Clean Flight, test the motors one last time, and make sure they're spinning in the correct direction. All right, back to Betaflight, hit connect, go back to the motors tab, still no props. Test the direction of each motor, so we're looking at this little map up here, make sure they're spinning correct. Yep, 1's spinning correct, 2's good, 3's good, 4's good. All right, now so let's set up our OSD. Now to the OSD tab. So here you have the option of turning on different OSD elements, and you essentially have a diagram here on the screen what the layout looks like, and also showing my FPV feed. Right now too, I got a little cap over the camera so it shows up black. But you can turn on or off various elements. So I'm not a big fan of the artificial horizon, so I typically turn those off. So I'll turn off these sidebars. Um, I do not need on time, but I do like to have fly time, and do have craft name on there. So that's the most of it. The other thing you can do here is if you if, what you see on your FPV screen may not be exactly, or what you see on the main screen here may not be exactly what you see on your FPV screen. So you can move them around. So if this voltage readout for the battery is too low or too high, or you want to move it somewhere else, you can just click it and scooch it over there, and it instantly changes. So perhaps I'll leave it over there in that upper right-hand corner. But once you change everything the way you want it and get it laid out on the screen correctly, then you just hit save. And it's really that simple. But the other thing I want to show you that's really handy with the OSD is to be able to change your tuning without having to go into Betaflight to do it. So the way you do that is change your PIDs. So you can get into a lot of the Betaflight settings by entering the configuration menu through your OSD. So what you do is you take your throttle stick and you move it to mid position, halfway up. And this is for mode 2, so your throttle stick's on your left. And then you take, while it's in that position, you hold it all the way to the left, and then you take your pitch or your elevator, your right stick, and move it all the way up. And then you get into the menu system. And using the right stick, you can move through the various settings. So there's lots of settings here, but what I'm going to do is move into profile, and you go to the right here, and then you go down to PID, and here you have all your PIDs. So let's say I want to change the D term on my roll um, to 35 to match the P term or the D term on my pitch. So I just go up and down until I select roll. This is on my right stick, roll the D term, and then I go to the right and I can save and increase it or decrease it. Right increases, left decreases. So you can go and change it, and then you can, once you get where you want it, you can hit back, go to the right, go down to the bottom, back again, and save and reboot. So if you just hit exit, then it would not have saved. So now here we are. All those settings should have been changed. Let's go back here and check. And so left stick halfway up, all the way to the left, right stick real quick to the top position, and go back into PIDs. And here we are. See, it's saved. It was 30, now it's 35. Perfect. So we can go back, and next time we could exit without saving. So that's it. So also on here, you can, you know, you can see your stability mode, your craft name at the bottom, uh, your on time, that's once you arm, and your voltage. So OSDs are really cool, and they're particularly cool if you can do your tuning without having going back to Betaflight each time and making the changes. So you can do all that at the field. Um, so with that, that wraps up the Betaflight configuration. I hope you enjoyed this video, and happy flying.